Howdy, of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Invasion of the Body Snatchers. This is the 1978, technically, remake of the movie, because the original black and white movie compared to this one, there is some copying and pasting of scenes going on in this movie. So a lot of people are just like, yeah, they just basically just redid the movie, and like, I think parts of this movie there is something that is like drastically different or maybe a little bit clever or like something that I was just like, okay, so this doesn't feel like it feels something different. Because I think in the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers, I think the main character like was a doctor that would just start seeking patients, and like all of the patients started to eventually like notice that people started acting differently. I thoroughly enjoy the black and white Invasion of Body Snatchers. If people want me to go back and review the original black and white Invasion of Body Snatchers, I will happily do that. That actually is a good movie to me. Uh, and plus, also, like, I thoroughly enjoyed that the first time through. I think probably more or less I think the very first time that I watched this, I really did enjoy it. Like, I think this time around, like the second time around, I don't know, it just kind of like it loses like its whimsy or whatever it is. Like, to me, like it like plus also you also have to have like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It always has to go the same way. Like it always like it straight up says like, well, this has a history of doing this. So what do you think, that they're just gonna all of a sudden like drastically change everything just because remake? Uh, Anyways, so I really enjoyed this cast of characters. Normally, you wouldn't see Leonard Nimoy doing anything else but Spock because it's illogical, or it's logical to not see him anywhere but being Spock because that made a huge chunk of change through a number of years. Jeff Goldblum has kind of done any wild, random, freaking movie. Like, look at Buckaroo Banzai, the Fifth Dimension movie, and just be like, wow, that movie's weird, and Jeff Goldblum's in that. And then all of a sudden you'll probably just assess, well, what about Independence Day? That was weird. Or any number of other things that he probably had been in through a number of his career. He's been in a lot of stuff like The Fly. I saw that recently. Ugh. But I had to watch it. So anyways, uh pushing on. So for this movie, I thought that it was, if I haven't said it before, I thought that this movie was smart. I thought it was clever. I felt that like it tried to do things differently from the original, but then there's also those scenes where I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. Here we are again. Uh, I enjoy of course, how could you not enjoy the parts where you're just seeing certain actors or actresses in all of their glory? Meaning that there's going to be points in this movie where people are not going to have clothes on because they are going from being potted people to now like, oh yeah, I'm just going to start walking throughout the town with no clothes on because I am now alien and I have no clothes. No spare clothes whatsoever. Uh, but I also enjoy the fact that we have people who are to be really paranoid of others in this film. Like, I enjoy the fact where, like, Elizabeth is, like, stalking her husband, like, for a bulk of this movie. Like, I don't care if it really seems like, man, this seems like a lot of nothing going on. No, like, I actually thought that, like, whole scene breakdown was really cool, where, like, Elizabeth is just like, yeah, so I followed my husband one day, and and he's doing some weird stuff. He's talking to people that I never thought he would be talking to. There's a lot of handoffs going on. It's weird. We have Leonard Nimoy, who is to be a psychiatrist in this episode, or in this movie, episode. I've been doing TV too much. I apologize. And plus, also, Leonard Nimoy spent a bulk of his career on TV, so it is what it is. Well, TV/movies, because he did the movies afterwards. Anyways, moving on. So Leonard Nimoy is to be a psychiatrist, and really actually enjoy this character. We have this character coming in that is trying to rationalize with these people, try to just you know what, for funny example, it's you're thinking I'm an alien right now because it seems like I'm trying to disprove everything that you're doing or everything that you're thinking and whatever and feeling and whatever. But what if I'm a normal person, and what if you're now an alien because you're paranoid? You're alienating everyone who could help you right now. So maybe you're the alien and I'm not. Do you ever think of that? Mind blown. You're alienating everyone. Maybe you're the alien. Maybe I'm fine. Maybe you don't even know what the alien actually is. That's the mind thing that Leonard Nimoy kind of delivers with some of these things that he talks in this movie, where he's trying to help people understand their brain or how it functions and stuff like that. We also have Jeff Goldblum, who is just a guy that's just kind of there. Most of his lines that are delivered in this movie, he's just a guy that's just there in this film. I think Jeff Goldblum was probably just hey man, if I can just be a part of this movie, I don't really care what it is. I love this film, and so hey, however you need me. I think probably Jeff desperately probably wanted the main freaking role, but he just got side saddled. So is what it is. So, meaning side character saddled. He just got with a character that didn't have any legs, but he's just there, sadly enough. Anyways, so let's move on. So really, I would just say we have some bigger scale things going on with sorry about that. We have some bigger scale things going on in this movie compared to probably the original. There's a kind of a tail end of this movie where, because Matthew is just naturally assuming that he's going to be able to call anyone out of state and try to see where these aliens have gotten so far into their reach. And then Matthew is to think oh, maybe we can go on this thing and we'll be safe. And then no. Maybe we can go into this spot and we'll be safe. No. But anyways, yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say about this movie in a very cryptic sense. There's nowhere to run. In the movie Body Snatchers, the woman is hey, where are you gonna go? Where are you gonna run? We're everywhere. There's nowhere you can go. So with that said, I think there's nowhere for us to go. There's nowhere for us to run, but get into spoilers about this. I might not be heavily specific about this review compared to others, just because more than likely I just don't know how well this is actually going to do. So justifiably, that's the basically way I'm delivering things. Because right now, there isn't one of those videos that's going to be skyrocketingly well, And if it does, more than likely there's going to just be a ton of comments where it's like, man, I wish you would have been a lot more detailed about this review. Because, like, that will always be what it is. Where the one thing that does go well would be the one thing that I didn't, like, overly get, like, specific on or whichever. And then that'll be the one that does well. And then I'll just be like, oh, like, I'll regret the fact that, like, man, that was the one that did well. Son of a bitch. I could have been more, like, detailed, and I could have really went for it. And I was like, and I just went into that one and I was like, nah, let's just toss this out there and call it a day. But anyways, let's go into this. So let's go to that coveted double 5-time territory, because it is spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this movie. So, in the very beginning of this film, we are to begin with seemingly having something in the outer space of places all of a sudden just going to get bizarrely picked up in the outer space wind, bizarrely, and then all of a sudden is going to just start appearing onto this thing called Earth. And so, whatever this thing that was wisping in the wind, making its way to the Earth, is to just land near some, like, playground of sorts, where bizarrely we have some preacher just kind of swinging on some swing set. Here's the thing. This actor that was actually swinging on the swing set is actually a very notable actor. And I just thought that was so bizarre when I was seeing this guy. Like, isn't that the guy from Days of Thunder? Is that guy from, like, Gone from 60 Seconds? The Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, The Sixth Day? That guy? In this movie, bizarrely a priest swinging on a swing? What the is up with this guy? Is he already invaded with alien? I don't know. So, all of a sudden, we are to have these bizarrish plants. And so, we have one woman who is named Elizabeth, who is to have found one of these plants and, like, tried to, like, pluck it so she could bring it home with her to try to figure out what exactly this plant is. So she tries to thumb through books and try to understand what this is. And, like, really she's just thinking, it's like, is it a Greek plant? Like, is it I can't figure out what this is. This plant feels very alien in origin or whichever. And so we have Elizabeth's husband who is just like, oh, well, that's great, honey, but, like, look at the football game. Like, I don't care about whatever. Like, I just want football game. So that leads to eventually both Elizabeth and Jeffrey going to sleep and waking up the next day, and Jeffrey seems to be a vastly different person. It seems that Jeffrey is to put on a suit and tie and mention that he needs to go to some meeting. And Elizabeth is like, okay, that seems kind of weird. So Jeffrey ends up getting picked up by these people. I guess he's carpooling to head on to his work. So let's transition here. So we have a guy named Matthew. Matthew seems to be a man who is to be a health inspector that is to go through restaurantes and close them down because they are to sell a little bit more than food. Maybe these things called rat turds. Or, for the restaurateur person, he used to call it a caper. No, it is a rat crap. I'm gonna close you down, motherfuckers. And eventually later on, Leonard Nimoy, who is to be Dr. David Kibner, is like, what the heck? What the heck, Matthew? You closed down my favorite restaurant. Hopefully they had some just horrible thing down in there that is going to give me E. coli or something and kill me off, because I am just upset that that place had closed. Like as if, like, Matthew is coming in there like Gordon Ramsay, flinging stuff around, yelling at people. Anyways, so Matthew is to go and, like, tell people that he found a rat crap. Like, he's like, hey, look at this little, like, jar that I have. Look at this. I found rat crap in restaurant. Look at me. I closed the restaurant down. Look at me. So, Matthew, I guess, is to also be a scientist of sorts. And Matthew is to call Elizabeth to put this this test together, and so that's how, like, Elizabeth and Matthew are to eventually meet, and then eventually they continue to talk with one another. So here's the thing: I don't really understand what actually Matthew does. Like, is he a scientist? I don't really know. Is he just too smart for his own good? I don't really understand. I think they probably do mention it in the movie, but, like, that just went phew over my head. So anyways, pushing on. So eventually Matthew is to just start going about his day, and Elizabeth is to be the first one to mention Matthew that she's seeing her husband acting differently, and Matthew is just like, you know what, I just think that more than likely you just need to see a therapist, because I don't really believe you that your husband is really and truly drastically different. And so Elizabeth is like, no, I just feel like he's different. And so Matthew's like, well, how about you go and see a psychiatrist, a therapist, to really just kind of, like, maybe, like, that'll change your perspective on it, because maybe it's something as simple as your Jeffrey maybe just changing it up and being a Republican, or maybe he uh, just wanted a slight change in hygiene or something like that, and uh, maybe that slight tweak of Jeffrey is all of a sudden making you think that he's drastically different, and he's not. To where Matthew says that, like, that's basically what the therapist would say to convince you that you're actually not, like, seeing a huge shift in Jeffrey's, like, entire life. And so Elizabeth is like, well, maybe I will talk to this guy. So Matthew and Elizabeth are making their way through town, driving to this bookstore to eventually talk to Leonard Nimoy's character, Dr. Kibner? Sure. Kibner. David. That's his name. We'll go with David, because that'll be a lot easier to pronounce than the other one. So, they push on to eventually go to this bookstore, and everyone is flipping out. We also have Matthew, who is to eventually go to his laundromat to go and try to get a coffee stain removed from off of his shirt. And the woman is to mention, like, you know what, I don't think we're probably going to be able to get this out. And Matthew is like, oh well, like. And so, the laundromat, like, the woman is to have told Matthew that, hey, like, I don't think we'll get this coffee stained out. The husband of that woman is to want to pull Matthew aside and say, hey, what kind of doctor are you? Like, are you a medical doctor? And Matthew's like, well, no, like, I'm not that kind of doctor. If anything, he's like, well, I'm a health safety, like, guy. And so this guy, like, pulls Matthew aside and he's like, my wife is different There's something about her. I just can't tell you exactly what, but she's wrong. Like, she's not my wife. And Matthew's like, well, is she sleeping with everybody else in town? Like, is she just banging it out, banging a bang, banging a... This is a joke. I'm making jokes. Like, this isn't actually what he says. But I thought that would be funny to just say that. So, this guy has to mention, like, his wife is wrong. And so Matthew's just like, well, there's nothing I can do about that. Like, have you seen a therapist? So, it just gets to the point where all of a sudden we have like car accidents happening, and then all of a sudden we have like some guy like running through this one stretch of road and smacking himself on the windshield like, help me, they're coming, help me. And Matthew was just like, roll up the window. Click. No, just no. So we just see this one guy running down the street, and all of a sudden there's a huge group of people running behind him, and and nobody's understanding what the heck is going on. So once Matthew is to get to this bookstore, he is to call the police to file this report about this man running through town like a crazy person. And so this is when we get Jack, aka Jeff Goldblum, to like be talking the entire time that Matthew is trying to talk to this police officer. And Jack grabs the phone from Matthew and is like, hello, officer. How may I help you? And Matthew like grabs the phone back and is like, God. It's like, because like Jeff Goldblum is just trying to be funny here, because I don't think he had much lines. Like, I think probably they had to come up with something for him to do in this film, because more than likely it was just like, like, Jeff Goldblum, you just be Jeff Goldblum in this movie. And Jeff was like, probably, okay, great. Great, I'll just go ahead and I'll just do the. Anyways, so Jack is to eventually see Dr. David Kimner's book and stuff like that, and he just kind of hates it. He's kind of like just giving Leonard Nimoy's character crap just about this guy's book. He's just like, I don't care for this book. So, but there's this book signing, and so David is just kind of lining these people up to sign his book, and all of a sudden there's repetitiously people that are coming to David and just be like, yeah, my husband is not who I thought he was. He's a different person. Is he having an affair? I don't know. So this woman is like clinging on to David, and David is just like, man, I wish I could have this all the time. Yeah, I'm gonna comfort you, woman, and then I'm gonna take you away from your husband. No, like, reasonably, this woman is to mention about a scar that is upon this guy's like body, and Elizabeth is to hear about this whole conversation. Elizabeth is just like chiming in. She's like, well, like, was his scar gone? And the woman's like, no. So what was so different about this guy? But anyways, so eventually the husband is to come into fray and just be like, honey, like, what? Like, what are you doing? So like David just like basically just pushes this woman off to go back with her husband and just be like, you know what, I just don't think you understand. Like, I think that you just need to just realize that, like, everything is fine. Because eventually we'll find out, like, some people are gonna just be aliens in this movie. So anyways, so push on here. So uh, David and Matthew are kind of talking, and David is mentioning how Matthew had closed his favorite restaurant, and so on and so forth. And so after this whole book signing thing is to be done, Matthew is to take David, and they're just gonna like kind of walk off to the side, so that way David could talk to Elizabeth for a little bit here. And so Elizabeth is mentioning how she feels that her husband is different, and so David is like, you know what? I want to show you something. And so David goes and like grabs Jeff Goldblum's character Jack and like flings him into a wall and just starts shouting at him, yelling at him, like calling him names, every kind of thing. And then all of a sudden, like David just lets Jack go, and Jack walks off. And so David is mentioning, it's like, how did you feel when I did that to him? Like, did you try to ignore it? Did you try to like think that like since you were here, but you weren't actually involved because it wasn't actually happening to you? And like, were you gonna try to block it out? Were you gonna chime in? Were you gonna like, what were you gonna do? And so Elizabeth is like, well, I kind of felt like I wasn't like actually involved, kind of thing. And so like that's where David is just like, yeah, like if anything, like if something like you're not reacting to something because it's not actually happening to you. It's not like you're going to ignore something. So like maybe Elizabeth Jeffrey has changed as a person for a very long time, and it just took Elizabeth a very long time to notice how drastically different this guy was until now. But that's really just not the case. Like, Elizabeth, like, your husband is a freaking alien. And just deal with it. Just deal with it that your husband is an alien, and he'll probably turn you into an alien too. So just don't ever sleep again. It'll work itself out. So that's what I would have told her. But anyways, so uh we get where Elizabeth is to spend more time with her husband by stalking him, eventually finding out that he goes to work every day and he is going to people and passing on, I guess, this plant to people. Like passing them on to just like, yeah, you're going to just infect this guy and you're going to infect that guy. And so Elizabeth is just like, yeah, like this does not make sense. This was not a thing that I thought my husband would be doing like during work. And so Matthew is like, well, yeah, I guess that could like sound odd. So because it's like random people all like gathering together to like do handoffs and shake people's hands and alien, I guess. So but what ends up happening is that Jack is to work at a spa. And here's where things start to get odd. So these guys are in this spa, like just laying in this mud bath and whichever. And so all of a sudden, we have Jack who is to like fall asleep at one point in time, and all of a sudden there is to be a pod person like thing growing off to the side here that looks just like Jack. And like bizarrely has this kind of there's stuff all over this body, and like it looks similar to Jack, but it's not exactly. So all of a sudden we are to have uh, Nancy, who is to eventually kind of like check up on all these people, And then eventually she goes and finds this pod body, which eventually has them call Matthew in here to just like, what the is this? This looks like a human being, but it looks like a uncooked human being, like as if like it's missing something, that it like doesn't look all quite that well and done, whatever. So Matthew goes and sees this body, and so all of a sudden Jeff is to go back, and Jeff Goldblum's character Jack is to go back, and because of all this like craziness, he is to go and want to go back into sleep, and that causes this alien thing to just move even more so, and so to basically like open its eyes and start walking around and whichever. So, but that doesn't mean that eventually Jack easily turns into one of these things. Like, I'm just kind of like mentioning what happens in this movie. So Matthew is to go and call David to like see what this thing is. And so David is just like severely skeptical, just be like, you know what, I think that you guys probably did see what you saw, and like maybe there was some kind of bizarre body here, because when of course David is to make it there, the body's all of a sudden gone. He's like, well, I could believe that there could be a body that had been here, but like to have it all of a sudden like start walking and talking its way out of here, that seems a little far-fetched. So we get where eventually Matthew is to try to convince David that, like, hey man, like I saw what I saw, and like believe me, man, like I'm like this is getting weird, like and like David is just like, you know what, like I believe you, because eventually Matthew is to make his way to Elizabeth's home and basically just break into this woman's home, because like Matthew already knows that Elizabeth's husband is an alien, so like Matthew is just getting to this home and just going and finding out that Elizabeth had almost turned into a pod person. And so because Matthew went into Elizabeth's home, like she's sleeping, and all of a sudden you just see like this like forming of an alien by Elizabeth's bedside, and so like really just Matthew is just like, you know what, like this one would look pretty good without some clothes on, but like we're gonna have to just see that a little bit later. So Matthew is to go and grab Elizabeth and take her from out of this home. And so, like, Matthew is just like, yeah, like, you almost, like, you had a pawn person in your home. You had an uncooked you in your home. That's why I took you and grabbed you, because, like, your husband's an alien, and he tried to change you, and yeah. So, what ends up happening is that Jeffrey is to, I think, call the police to, like, reasonably, I think, have the police also, like, as aliens, too. So they're just kind of, like, persuading, like, Matthew, and it's like, I don't think you saw what you saw, and obviously, like, Elizabeth's like, body swapper, snatcher, whatever, like obviously isn't here, so and so Matthew is just like saying like, well, yeah, and her husband is also an alien, and like so these cops are just like, yeah, you loon, you want to spend some night in the loony bin there, buddy, because you're losing it. So Matthew is to go on and try to just call anybody that'll listen at this point. He's trying to call like the top men, scientist people, like try to call anybody and everybody, just like, hey man, hear me out. Like I know that these people are body swapping people. I just need some help here. And when Matthew is to call these people, he is to basically just get the runaround, where these people are all saying it's like, well, like, I don't think that you're, like, you don't have, like, any real, like, evidence of a body snatching thing. Like, and also it seems that, like, these people are are getting a call from Matthew, and they're, like, really just tearing him apart and disproving a lot of this stuff because there isn't no real hard evidence that any of this stuff is, like, they're just going basically by this guy's word. And so they're like, well, how about you do this? How about you do not tell a single soul about any of this body swapping business, because you're just going to create a crazy panic of things, because I think that you are just incorrect, sir. Like, there is no real true evidence about this that you have at your disposal. So, like, and plus also, like, by the time that is to actually have hard evidence, it would probably be mysteriously gone. Because more than likely, if he was like, oh yeah, I have, like, real true evidence in my basement, I bet whoever this person is pod person, and they're just like, okay, well, now we can just kill you and just pod you up. So anyways, so Matthew is getting all these people disproving him through this phone, and so Matthew's just like, there is nowhere to run, there's no one to talk to, no one's gonna listen to me. Everybody just thinks that I'm just, like, if I don't have proof, that they're not gonna do a single thing. So that lands us into having uh, Matthew, Elizabeth, Jack, and Nancy reasonably being the only real humans seemingly left upon this earth. So that leads all four of these people who are to go on into a room or into an apartment and just kind of, like, all sleep together. And also we have David with them this whole entire time. And so while these people were going into one house together, all, like, falling asleep together, all of a sudden we start seeing that eventually some of these people are just going to become pod people. Because eventually eventually Matthew is to eventually grow a half-cooked pod person, while Matthew is to fall asleep or doze off. And so Matthew wakes up to see that there is a pod person that is, of course, him, and so he's like, crap, like, man, I shouldn't have fell asleep. So, and all of a sudden everybody else is starting to see, like, a pod person. So there's, like, a pod person between them, and you would have to naturally believe that it is gonna have to be David at this point. And ding ding, fries are done. Yeah, David is a pod person, and so, like, basically they can't escape this. Like, and so Matthew and Elizabeth and Jack and Nancy, like, Jack and Nancy are separating, and Matthew and Elizabeth are on their own. And and also Nancy is to eventually figure out that they can actually beat these aliens, like, seem like they are to be like them by, like, just being emotionless and all kinds of things. But eventually what ends up happening is, while Matthew and Elizabeth and Nancy are just kind of walking through this part of town, eventually they see a dog with a man's face on it, and one of the girls freaks out, and so they're like, like, human, like, like, they were trying to fake emotion us, like, no, they're human. Go get them. Human face but dog body. Go and get them. Go ahead. So, anyways, because weirdly, yeah, human face but dog body, so strange, so weird. Anyways, so pushing on. So, because what ends up happening is Jack ends up getting turned, and then David ends up getting turned, and so Eventually, this leads to Matthew going to a scientific lab to take speed. And Elizabeth is like, Matthew asks Elizabeth, like, well, how much should we take? She's like, take one. And he's like, take five. Just pop in that speed like it's nobody's business. So that leads both Matthew and Elizabeth to be found out by these people. And so they forcibly go. Leonard Nimoy's character is giving both Matthew and Elizabeth a sedative so that way they can sleep. And Matthew is telling David's character, it's like, David, you're killing me. Don't you know that? Don't you realize that? You're killing me, David. Like, how does that make you feel knowing that you're going to kill me? And David's like, I don't care. Because if anything, we have basically, like, taken over your people. Like, if anything, we came onto Earth surface one day and just decided, like, hey, we're going to just take over your whole entire thing, your whole entire slew. So we get a very little bit, a little sliver of, like David kind of giving us the backstory of this alien race and how they're going to just easily take over all these people. So, because eventually everybody will eventually need to sleep. So, now, Matthew and Elizabeth are to trying to escape from this scientific lab of sorts, and so both Matthew and Elizabeth are to just run off to, like, find a boat. And so they're like, oh my god, Matthew's like, oh my god, we're gonna go into this boat. Like, I think we'll be safe from that. All of a sudden, like, this boat is to shimmy down this thing filled of just, like, alien little pod things. And so Matthew's like, crap. Like, God, there's nowhere to go. We're never going to be safe. Plus, also the spot where Leonard Nimoy was giving them the sedative. That's just like the other. That's like the other Invasion of the Body Snatchers. That scene, copy and paste. Also, in the original black and white movie, what ends up happening is we just see a ton of people all getting into this one town square and taking these little pod things and like taking like these like looking pod things and just saying like, hey, anybody that hasn't been infected, go ahead and take them out. And so like these tons and tons of people are all just in this one spot. I'm like, man, this looks freaking huge. And like as a innuendo joke, man, this looks huge. Yeah, thanks. Whatever. So, but yeah, so like, but man, like I liked the original black and white one, but like there's something about this movie that just kind of like it feels there's a bigger kind of scale going on, because eventually Matthew is to make his way to find this giant nest where they're like nesting these like pods. And so Matthew is going in here and he is going to try and kill all of these things off, like try to figure out a way to like light these things on fire by pulling off like an electrical fire to just take these things down and kill them off so they won't like spread this nest wider. And so like they're trying to do a greenhouse with here. They're trying to like pull off a greenhouse, and so Matthew's realizing he needs to go and take this out. He needs to wipe them out. So eventually he goes and like just electrical fires them to death, I believe. And so, but eventually it gets to the point where Elizabeth is like, dude, I gotta freaking sleep. Like, I am exhausted. I cannot go any further. And so, while Matthew is doing all of this that I just mentioned, going onto the boat, trying to get this nest to be dead, Matthew is to go back to Elizabeth to just see her just like, like conking onto the ground, all of a sudden we are to see a non-clothed version of Elizabeth who's just like, "Hey, Matthew, guess what? You're gonna be the only human left there, bucko." and so, like, because Matthew is just holding on to Elizabeth as he's to have her body crush into him, because, like, this is like Thanos snapping after, like, once you, like, get somebody who is to, like, get every piece of them just kind of, like, sucked away to this other pod person. Eventually they just, like, crush into, like, little Thanos pieces. And so Matthew is to have the squeeze of Elizabeth, and then eventually we see other Elizabeth. It's not like, "Arr!" So now Matthew is just freaking booking it. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to run. Everywhere he is to go, somebody's to be like, "Arr!" at him. So Matthew's last resort is to eventually just hide under this, like, sewer slash, like underground thing, hoping that no one's going to see him and whichever. And, like, eventually people are making their way down to get to him. And so all of a sudden we just see Matthew, who is to go and blend in, like, faking that he's one of these things, like, going in and just be like, "Yeah, like, I really played all these guys." And so Matthew is just strutting along, just like, "You know what? I think I did it. I pulled it off. Like, everybody thinks that I'm one of them now. Like, huzzah! Like, I've won. Like, maybe I'll reverse engineer all this and, like, and I'll just take them all out." Or so we're led to believe. Because what ends up happening at the very end of this movie is we have Nancy, who's walking along, just like, "Oh, hey, like, Matthew, like, you're still alive." And Matthew's like, "Arr!" And it's like, oh no, Matthew even got freaking, like, alienized. And so Nancy is just like, "Oh my god, even you, Matthew, the main character technically that has most of the focus put on him, you're the alien? Mother, because, like, the very first, like, time that I saw this, I was like, man, I got duped. Like, I got duped. I was like, Matthew made it. Like, he's, like, faking like he's one of them. But then all of a sudden you're like that, and it's like, oh no, he's one of them. Oh, like, I thought he, like, outsmarted him because he's the focused character. Like, I didn't think that they would have gone and, like, done the focused character as an alien. Like, I thought they would have at least given us some shred of hope, but no. Like, everybody was gonna get turned, baby. Everybody was gonna get turned. Like, and so eventually everybody's gonna their way into getting everybody and turning them. And so, yeah, so I kind of really brushed through a lot of this stuff, but I also hope that I got through a bulk of this movie. There's some technical parts and there's some, like, dialogues or whatever that I just kind of, like, it's like, hey man, just watch the movie, you get the dialogue. Like, I'm also going to be reviewing Cosmopolis at the same time, and good god, that dialogue is just like, yeah, how about I just take all that dialogue and just it in the trash, because there's a lot of, like, intelligent, high-end talking, like, conversations. It kind of, like, that movie feels like almost quasi, like, Shakespeare to me. So I'm just gonna, like, man, like, that's gonna be fun to review. But with that said, I am going to get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.